Welcome to the Prison Professors program. If you've been watching this inside of a jail or a prison, you know how crucial it is to use your time inside today to prepare for success in the weeks, months, years, and decades ahead. My name is Michael Santos, and I did 26 years in prison. While I was going through that journey, I always looked to leaders, and leaders would help me understand how to adjust more effectively. Today, I'm really enthusiastic to introduce you to Brad. He is a successful business professional who's going to tell us about his journey. And as I've done through all of our courses, I'm going to be sharing with you what would I have learned from Brad if I were in there, and what I hope you can learn from Brad as well. So Brad, before we get into your background, first of all, just let me, on a personal level, thank you for taking the time with us. I know you're a busy guy, but why don't you tell our audience where you are and the types of businesses you have been involved with over the course of your career?
Thanks, Mike. I'm in my home in Frisco, Texas, just north of Dallas, Fort Worth. Um, and I started my career in accounting, external auditing, and financial consulting, working for several years in a variety of industries, um, more on the accounting, finance, numbers side. And then you transitioned to operating and then ultimately owning my own home health and hospice care business. And since then, transitioned to operating a construction military roofing company.
And what are the size, first of all, what are the size of these businesses so that our audience can get an idea of what kind of revenues, how many employees, just to give them an idea of the complexity of organizations you have either participated in or built on your own?
So early on, I worked for large international firms with tens of thousands of employees. And then when I transitioned to owning and operating my own businesses or business units, in the case of the construction company that I operate right now, we on the healthcare side I started that business from my kitchen table, actually, with four people, and grew that to $30+ million in revenue with several hundred employees. On the construction side, I started working for a local residential and commercial roofing company, and opened and developed our the first military construction business unit of the company. At first, it was just me, and now I believe we have close to 70 or 80 employees, and probably 15 people approximately that directly report to myself.
Now, I know that when I was in prison, obviously I didn't have an opportunity to develop big teams and to work with big organizations, but I have to imagine there were lessons that you learned at every different stage that have just made you more competent and successful as a business executive. Could you walk us through, in the very beginning, like what are some of those basic skill sets that a person needs to develop in order to execute and succeed at a high level like you have done?
I would say two things. One being fundamentally how to communicate with people and different types of people. You in business, and it is very much a microcosm of life in general. You interact with uh, varieties of different people from different backgrounds, different experiences, and knowing how to tailor your communication with those individuals is critical. So honing those communication skills and knowing how to tailor those to the individuals you encounter. And then from a communication standpoint, electronic communication has become such a huge part of our culture and our society. I took some business communication courses early on in my career that really helped me transform what you learn in grade school from a writing and communication standpoint electronically, and how to better utilize that to be effective in business, because it's a lot different than I think a lot of us are used to growing up.
I think a lot of people in our audience didn't have that kind of intuitive foresight to recognize I've got to learn how to communicate well. I've got to learn how to interact with people from all sectors of society. I've got to learn how to communicate on paper because people are going to judge me by what they read or write. But you seem to have gathered that information over the course of your career, and you certainly derived value from that. That's something I could definitely learn from. That would have been a takeaway just from what you just told us. Why don't you give us some background on your family? Because a lot of the people that we interact with and we try to teach are in jails and prisons, and they didn't always have a lot of positive role models around them. And they're certainly living in an environment without positive role models. What was your experience growing up, and what kind of role models were around you?
uh, I I grew up with mother and father, intact home. Father was a very successful attorney for a number of years. He's actually still practicing in his, I believe, late 60s now. Um, and my mother primarily at first stayed at home and then went back to work as a drug counselor for the school district. But both of them were on me from a very early age. I would say starting very young, ingraining really the importance of math. Math was always a huge thing in our household in school, and it's something I think you have difficulty understanding as a child on why it's important. And then secondarily to that, just communication, utilizing, understanding of the English language. My dad constantly would correct me, my sentences as I was talking, and obviously it was very frustrating at times.
Well, I think that's an important lesson, though, and it certainly helped you grow and become a successful business executive. It can certainly help people in jail or in prison. When I was incarcerated, I was always listen to business executives. Even though I was incarcerated, I could listen to them on the radio, on whether it was listening through NPR, listening to talk radio shows, and it always inspired me when I heard somebody that could communicate effectively as you're doing right now, and as you just described is so important in building a business. What about your personal educational experiences? We know that your father was a lawyer, which meant he went to probably did well in high school, did well in undergraduate school, and then went on to law school before he became an attorney. How about you? What was your experience like in both grade school, college, and your entire academic journey?
Growing up in grade school through high school, um, academics was a huge focus. Making good grades and was critical in my household, and it was something that it was expected, and it was kind of one of those things that if you wanted us to continue to to take care of you, to pay for your college, etc., that had to happen. And secondarily to that, my father really ingrained athletics into me, which uh, we may get to later. But from high school, graduated high school in '99, went to the University of Texas at Austin for 5 years, was in the 5-year accounting program, got a bachelor's and master's in accounting. And also shortly thereafter sat and passed the CPA exam and became a licensed CPA in 2005.
So, as a young boy, did you have aspirations of the type of career that you wanted to build, or did that not materialize for you until you were older?
Early on, I very much wanted to emulate my father. I was intrigued by law school and just overall that success. I think growing up as the son of a lawyer helped instill some fundamentals that have been good for me in business, such as negotiation skills. It seemed like a lot of times, a lot of things in our household was a negotiation, and maybe even at times a debate. Um, but I think it was not until high school when I really wanted to utilize those skills that I saw my father had, but utilize it more to, ultimately running my and operating my own business. But I knew in order to do that, it was critical that I understood the accounting and finance of businesses, because that's really the backbone of any business is the financial fundamentals. And so I knew if I went into that and did that early on in my career, that would be a really good foundation for me to ultimately transition into more of an operations capacity.
So you started, had you had your eye on the accounting profession when you were how old?
I was probably 16, 17. Investment banking was very sexy back then. I started looking at finance capacities and different things like that. However, I really wanted to get an advanced degree, and the University of Texas had a top-notch accounting program. I think it, at that point in time, and still very likely is, considered one of the top one, two, or three accounting schools in the country. So being able to get an advanced degree in one more year was very appealing to me. And then ultimately, I knew getting that CPA license would really give me a safety net to fall back on, regardless of fundamentals in the economy, which it was obvious that, finance and investment banking can be more prone to economic downturns and things like that.
You mentioned four different professions there. And a lot of the time that when I was in prison, I heard these terms, but I didn't always know what they meant because I went to prison at a very young age. And I know that a lot of the people in our audience are similar. They've not come from a traditional background of going to universities and participating in the career track. So why don't you, if you could, give us a snapshot of what it means to be an investment banker? That's would be one. What does it mean to be involved in finance? Maybe that's two. Maybe they're one and the same. Maybe you have a different definition for each. What does it mean to be an accountant? And then the third was, you mentioned certified public accountant, a CPA. So could we start by just giving me your bullet point explanation of what is an investment banker?
So investment banking is a component of the finance field. I'd look at finance as more of a broader term in terms of different types of, it could mean stocks and bonds. It could mean mergers and acquisitions. There's a variety of different types of things. Investment bankers typically focus on when companies are raising capital, larger transactions, or a company's being acquired by another company, and what it looks like to structure those transactions and help raise that capital. And then finance, obviously, as I just mentioned, in my view, is a broader term that encompasses just a broader array of financial transactions that take place in the business world on a daily basis. Transitioning to accounting, accounting really is the fundamentals of how transactions are, for lack of a better term, accounted for throughout the daily lives of businesses. So everything, every transaction, every deal, every purchase that a business undertakes on a daily basis can be accounted for through numbers. And that's why accounting is so critical in my mind of understanding how businesses operate, is because every transaction is accounted for. And so accounting is just understanding those transactions and how to put them on paper and how transactions lead to putting that on paper. A CPA would be a higher level of certification that someone in the accounting profession could achieve that typically can operate as an advisor or a consultant or an auditor for a variety of businesses, large, small, medium. Also could help them with their taxes. So hopefully that kind of gives your listeners a broad overview of those four areas.
It's very helpful. And I think it's what's really a takeaway for me and all that is all of these disciplines that you just mentioned, whether it's finance, whether it's investment banking, whether it's accounting, or whether it's advancing to get a credential, a skill to become a certified public accountant, a CPA, all of them require a couple of fundamental skills that we really try to emphasize in our courses. And one of them is that I think all of those disciplines have in common is a person really needs to develop an aptitude for mathematics and just basic, sometimes addition, multiplication, and division. Of course, you can go much higher than that with equations and so on and so forth, but just a basic understanding of math is necessary for any of those disciplines that you've spoken about. The other is critical thinking. A person really has to develop the skill set to understand business and then understand how every decision comes with an opportunity cost. As you said, in accounting, we want to be able to track, well, we can account for every dollar that was spent, but critical thinking helps us understand, well, could we have done? What decisions could we have made that may have been better? And how can we use that disciplined thinking to make better decisions going forward? And so listening to you really, I hope, leaves our listeners with an impression that says, I've got to study math, I've got to study English, I've got to develop critical thinking skills so that I can advance in my career. And your career, after you earned your accounting credentials, started off in the business community. Could you walk us through what that career looked like and how it evolved over time?
Straight out of college, after graduating with my master's in accounting and sitting for the CPA exam, I went to work as an external auditor for Deloitte, which is a large international accounting firm.
Could you tell us how you got that job?
I actually interned for them during my senior year. When I say senior, my fourth of fifth year in college. And then ultimately, at the end of that internship, was offered an opportunity to come on full time after my fifth year, which was great because I knew that I had a place to land upon graduation, which was important to me.
But let's back that up even a little further, because you said you interned with them during your fourth and fifth year of college. How did that happen? Walk us through how a person went from being a student to landing a position where he could intern, and as you just said, put himself on the pathway to have a job waiting for him when he went home. How did you get that position?
Really doing well in my first couple years in college. So going into our third year in the professional program in accounting at UT, the main accounting firms and some large industry firms as well arrange and start reviewing candidates through the business school, do an initial screening, so to speak. And based on your resume and your grades primarily, and extracurricular is important as well, they request to interview you during your spring of your third year. And so doing well in college from a grade standpoint and also participating in extracurriculars really helped me. I would say the grades really helped me get the interviews. And I think the experiences I had growing up through mathematics and just a heavy focus on writing, and then also my experiences in team sports, and then ultimately extracurriculars in college really helped me in the interview drive home my experience and why I felt I'd be a good fit for the firm at that point in time.
If we could touch on what you just described, you'd mentioned something what you learned from sports. What sports did you play, and walk us through some of the lessons that you think translated from sports into academics and then into business?
From a very young age, I started playing baseball very competitively up through middle school. And then in high school, I started playing football and played varsity football my senior year, and started at right guard and almost went to play Division III football, but ultimately decided that that wasn't going to lead me to where I wanted to be in life and how I define success, and ultimately decided to go to college at the University of Texas. I felt like that was my best path. The lessons I learned primarily was being able to overcome adversity and what that looked like, and secondarily to that, how important it is to operate in teams and what that looks like effectively. So I think in football, you have 11 guys on each side of the on offense and then on defense, and it's very much every single person has to do their job effectively, and if one person doesn't, the entire team can let down. And then, of course, you have the coach who you see leading those efforts and calling the plays. And I think it's very much a microcosm of what you see in business and how you have to lead individuals and how to tailor your communication and strategy to different types of personalities.
And the more the more we practice that philosophical approach that you just described, is understanding we have to learn how to work with teams. We had to learn how to, help the team grow, learn how to communicate in a manner so everybody is achieving the end game, the objective, and advancing the ball, so to speak, really helps us in our career, really helps us through wherever we're going to go. And even if we're sitting inside of a jail or a prison, we may not be able to position ourselves for an interview or an employment with a big firm like you did, but we could certainly be learning the basic skills today that will just accelerate our pathway to success later, particularly if we learn how to communicate well, if we learn how to interact with other people. You'd mentioned that the team at Deloitte recognized your excellence with by reviewing your grades, and they offered you an intern position. What did you do as an intern?
You very much primarily operate as you would as a first year accountant, external auditor, primarily analyzing financial records, looking at bank statements, looking at individual financial transactions. One of the other things that we did that was a very common audit tool, and as an auditor, where we are being hired by the company to analyze and provide a level of assurance to the investment community and the public at large that the numbers that a large company like Google or Microsoft or Dell Computers or whomever is reporting is accurate and you can rely on it. And one of the things we often relied on was comparing what we called analytics, which was comparing overall financial numbers for given categories in the current year versus prior year and years even before that, to kind of give us a baseline of whether those transactions in the current year were reasonable. And so obviously my mathematics growing up was a huge component in being able to, conduct that type of analysis.
Well, you said that you started off there as an intern, and that put you in a position to have full-time employment after you earned your master's degree in accounting. How long did you stay with Deloitte, and why did you leave, and what did you go do next?
I was there for about 2.5 years.
I said Deloitte, it's Deloitte.
Deloitte, yes, sir. Yeah, I was there about 2.5 years. I wasn't looking to leave. I had an offer from out of the blue for FTI Consulting to do forensic and litigation consulting.
And what is forensic consulting?
So forensic is another term for fraud. And so one of the things that we focused on, and the litigation part comes from this, I think it goes hand in hand, is we really focus on helping clients that, at least in this role, helping clients that are have questions or lawsuits or litigation from shareholders or from government entities about the legitimacy or authenticity or the reality, so to speak, of their transactions, and helping those clients and attorneys navigate those waters. Because, as you know, anytime there's an investigation like that, the company's going to hire an attorney, but attorneys are only skilled in the law. They're not skilled in being able to identify and really analyze financial transactions and help them understand what the problems are that they may be facing so they can best represent their clients. And so we really worked with attorneys to help these larger organizations navigate these types of government investigations or litigation from shareholders or similar types of problems.
And so you were in this forensic accounting position for how many years?
Just over 2 years.
And then what was the next phase of your career?
At that point in time, I'd spent, close to 5 years, really ingrained in just analyzing transactions from an audit perspective, then transitioning more to client facing, helping them face challenges and overcome challenges. And from there, I really wanted to operate a business. And so I had an opportunity to completely transition to something different, which was the hospice and home health care industry through a friend of mine's dad who had a fledgling hospice business in the Denton, Texas area, north of Dallas. And he gave me an opportunity to take over the operations and kind of see what would happen.
What is a hospice?
A hospice company is a company that treats patients who have been diagnosed as terminally ill by a physician. Typically, they're in their last 6 months of life. That's not to say that they couldn't live longer. And there's two primary types of hospices. There's inpatient hospices, which is what a lot of people think of when they think of hospice, which is a hospice house where people go and there's multiple patients there under the care of the hospice. However, most hospices in this country operated how we operated, which was in-home hospice care, where we came to you to provide care for your loved one at the end of their life.
And did you have any experience in healthcare before you pursued that career?
Outside of working with a handful of clients in like hospitals doing financial transactions at Deloitte and FTI Consulting, no, I did not.
And so then am I to take it that by becoming an accountant and learning to work with accounting, you learn about, you put yourself in a position to get into any type of sector, because if you understand the numbers of one business, you can apply that knowledge to another business. If you specialize in resorts or hotel management, that same knowledge of how to work with numbers and measure performance would apply even to the healthcare industry, the technology industry, any industry. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And I hope people can take, that's a big takeaway from this, is that if you can, as a business professional, to be successful in business, if you understand the numbers and fundamentals, sure, within every industry, there's nuances and little intricacies, but those are things that can be learned. If you have a basic fundamental knowledge of math, and then take it a step further, you understand how to communicate effectively in our modern world. I mean, you really have the fundamentals to be successful to launch your career. And I think anyone listening to this should understand that don't be overwhelmed with, be thinking where you want to be 20 years ahead, or looking at other people thinking you can never get there. If you just start with some basic fundamentals and then work hard from that and continue to follow a plan, you can really get where you want to go. And when you end up looking back on it, you kind of like, how did this happen so quickly?
Yeah, you'd mentioned earlier during our interview that as a young boy, or when you were young, it's hard to make a connection or relationship between math and success later in life, or the relationship between English and success later in life. But as we listen to you, we see how that investment, that personal investment that you made, higher levels of math skills, higher levels of communication skills, opened opportunities for you. And I think that it's never too early, it's never too late to learn these concepts. Unfortunately, people in jail or in prison sometimes miss that messaging, and they think that success might be just getting a GED. But when we're listening to you, we're hearing that it's a lot more than that. It's not only doing well in high school, it's not only learning lessons from sports, it's also positioning yourself for an undergraduate degree and then a graduate degree, and then even doing some on-the-job training with big companies before you settle down to become an entrepreneur and launch your own business. When you decided you'd said that you started a hospice company and healthcare, home health company from your table. Before you did that, how much time did you spend immersed in the hospice space, working for your friend's dad's company?
About just over 2 years.
And what did you learn during those 2 years that motivated you to say, this is the space I want to become an entrepreneur in?
First, the very first thing I learned is that there was a problem in the marketplace. There was an opportunity for something different, something better, and that's and then from there, I really focused on learning just the the financial components of the business, and then how to operate with and generate the finances needed to, create an operational profit and be profitable on a daily basis. And so, but it started with seeing that there was an opportunity, and then understanding the financial components of the business, and then from there, how to operate within the industry through the regulatory environment that existed.
When you say there was a problem in the industry, help us understand what problem you saw in the industry.
The problem I saw fundamentally was that hospice is supposed to be, and is advertised, and the intention of it from the government is for it to be to help give people who are at the end of their lives the absolute best quality of life possible for however many days they have left. And I saw that there was a focus on dying from the competitive hospice companies, and focusing on, hey, you're dying, this is what we can't do for you now since you're dying, as opposed to, hey, how can we help you have the best week, 2 weeks, 6 months, year, 2 years left in your life, and how do we tailor and operate within that environment to accomplish that? And that was the opportunity that I saw, and I didn't see many of our competitors operating in that arena.
So you believe that if you, instead of focusing on expensive medicines and expensive healthcare, there might be a better approach to just say, let's recognize this is a terminal illness and make the highest quality of life possible.
Yes, that for sure. And one of the things we really wanted to do as well was understand that, and this is something I really want your listeners to understand, is whenever you get into business, you want, for me, I wanted to be the very best at whatever business I was doing. I wanted to provide the best service to my clients. And so one of the things in hospice that I found was, in order to provide the best level of care and the best service, it might cost me more money than my competitors spend. However, the dividends and the results that'll come from that money, the word of mouth from families to other families, the word of mouth from in the community, very much a grassroots effort, would help grow the business. And so for me, it fundamentally came back to numbers, to where if I spent more money, my margins might be lower, but do I want to make 15% of $1 million, or do I want to make 100% of nothing? And so that's really how I positioned my overall business model, and how we serviced our patients with those fundamentals. And that's really, I think, what led to our growth.
What was the motivation for you in wanting to transition from the stability and security of a large established accounting organization that clearly offered opportunities to earn, you said 15% of $1 million, 150 grand. Many people in that industry earn that kind of money. There's more risk in becoming an entrepreneur. Tell us about the motivation on why you wanted to make that switch from stability of a big stable company to being a startup entrepreneur.
So for me, and it's different for everybody. I did not. I felt that my 5 years in large accounting and finance gave me a great fundamental foundation and understanding of a variety of types of businesses and business transactions. I did not like the hierarchical, like, pay your dues approach of working in big business, to where I felt that I wanted to work in more of a meritocracy type environment, where what you get out of it, the results that you see, are more directly what you put into it. Whereas I think in big business, unfortunately, just due to the size and the nature of these companies, it's very much like, okay, whoever can be there the longest is going to give you the best chance to be the highest ranked person there. And so I wanted to work in more of a results driven, in an environment where the results were more directly tied to the effort I was putting in. And I felt like starting my own business would do that for me.
And so what does it take? What should somebody be thinking about when they're going to make a transition from leaving steady employment to becoming an entrepreneur? Did you have a financial cushion to start? or were you the typical entrepreneur that's, starting in his garage and going to build from there?
I didn't have a huge financial safety net. Very much took on some credit card debt prior to starting our hospice company. Um, I also had some very fortunate circumstances because I was living with my wife, who before I met her had, our home was purchased in foreclosure, so we didn't have a house payment. So I think everyone's circumstances are different. Um, for me, I didn't have much. We had to seek in order to get the business up and going, had to raise close to $1 million in capital. And so I really put my head down for about 6 months and focused on putting together a business plan and really thinking about every aspect of how I was going to effectively execute that plan. Because I knew, for lack of a better term, I was at that point, especially after I raised the money, I was pretty much, all in, pot committed to that business plan. And so I wasn't going to let it fail.
So you mentioned business plan twice in that paragraph. Tell us what is a successful business plan? How would we define what a successful business plan is?
So for me, and I think if you talk to other people or research other people, they may tell you different. But for me, it's really, I think as individuals, it's very easy to get lost in and overwhelmed by kind of the vision of what you want and where you want to get there. So I think for me, I had to dial it back to, okay, what I call an executive summary, which is, what's my idea? What is my purpose? And what is the problem that my idea is solving? And then from there, give the reader or the investor, my audience. So let me take a step back. I'm a big believer in whenever you draft something or communicate something, you have to know your audience. So I had my audience was potential investors who are successful business people who have a very short attention span. So for me, an executive summary was critical. So as I stated, state my overall idea, the purpose for that idea, and the problem that I feel needs to be solved. From there, and this executive summary should be maybe a page at most, 4 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs. Then from there, what's the background of the industry or the problem that you just stated your idea was revolved around? And then how does your idea solve that problem? And why are you ultimately the person that they should believe can solve that problem and be successful? And so then from there, you can really launch your get into the more specifics. But when you end up facing those investors, you just hit those high points and really drive that home for them.
You said that it took you or at least I understood you to say that for 6 months, you rolled up your sleeves and really worked on developing this business plan and getting this off the ground. What are the incremental steps that it takes from the time a person conceptualizes an entrepreneurial venture, a business, to the time that you're executing and you're bringing customers into the company?
So I think it would vary based on the industry, your experience, making sure you have people in the right roles as partners, in addition to investors. But I think, anywhere from 6 months to upwards of a year is critical. 6 months for me was from start of the business plan to raising money to being able to get to the point to where we could launch. And I would say we launched in probably 8 or 9 months. The key components are first and foremost, doing what I said, just putting your idea on paper for yourself, and then understanding, okay, what type of market research can I do to help support that idea? Because your investors are going to want to see that you put in the effort to research your idea, that it's not just some one-page thing that doesn't have any substance that it's based off of. From there, they want to see the financial forecasts of your idea. What does your business model look like, and how is it going to perform over the first, second, and ultimately 5-year? What's your 10-year term? What's your exit strategy? That's another big thing for investors. What's your overall exit strategy? And then I think from there, they want to know about you and trust you. So they want to know about your background. They want a good bio on you. They want a bio on your key people that you've identified as key players that can make your business successful, as well as any partners you may have.
When you said you raised $1 million, that is a pretty hefty sum. What did you pledge that the company would generate in order to justify $1 million investment from people that were going to trust you?
We thought that within 5 years we could have generated 10-time return on the investment for the investors. We felt that based on we being myself and my 3 partners felt that based on our experience, whether it be in the hospice field, which a lot of it was, and then one of our partners outside, that we could go from 0 patients to under our care to about 60 patients within 1 year, and then ultimately to about 150 patients after 2 years, and then in 5 years several hundred patients, and we ended up far exceeding those expectations.
How much revenues would a business like that have to generate to provide investors with a 10x return over 5 years?
I would say pretty much what we, probably less than what we did actually. I would say about 20 million in revenues, $25 million in revenues. And we ended up, I think, when we exited, we're just over 30, between 30 and 35.
And what did the investors get? Was it debt where they were going to get paid back 10x in debt with fixed payments, or were they equity shareholders in the company? And if they were equity shareholders, how did you decide how much equity to give them?
So one of the things that was very important for us was that our family maintained voting control of the business. And so that may be just a very important thing to know is, and it's something I didn't touch on earlier, is how you organize your business and how you retain control of that business while still seeking equity investors is critical. We sought equity investors, Michael, to answer your question. And so it was critical that we structured our business in such a way that we being myself and my wife, didn't dilute our ownership so much to where we would lose control potentially, or voting control of the business. What attracted our investors was primarily the money that they would see upon exiting, which would have looked at like a straight up sale exit, or it could have been a sale to private equity, which is something that anyone watching this should know that's thinking about being an entrepreneur is a huge exit opportunity for small business owners is to sell to private equity, where a larger company sees you as somebody like you, as someone that has a very innovative idea they want to adopt. And so the majority of our investors were going to see it through sale, and then they also received periodic dividends as approved by the board of directors.
So if they were going to sell, they had a piece of ownership of the company. You didn't owe them anything. If you failed, they would have failed alongside you. But if they had ownership, how much ownership would $1 million buy them? Did they have 20% of the company, 50% of the company, 40%? How much equity did you have to give up to raise $1 million?
I think it was about just under 50% of the business. Take that back, about 40% of the business.
So the company, effectively, you were valuing the company at somewhere in the $2.5 million range, and you sold 40% of it. But it was just an idea at that point. And I like to bring that out to our audience, because a lot of people in prison are going to come home without any money. But if they have a good idea, and if they can write a good business plan, and if they can articulate what investors can expect to receive, they are in a position to potentially go raise money just like you did. They may have to say, hey, I'm going to value this company not over the next 3 weeks, but what I can achieve over 5 years. And to the extent that the individual can really lay out a good plan and show how he's going to execute on that plan, he might be able to excite some investors to pony up the cash. Maybe not $1 million, but maybe the person only needs 10 grand. Maybe the person only needs 25,000. Well, there's plenty of people that would like to invest $10,000, $25,000, $100,000 to get a 10x return if they can do that. And that although the person may not be able to go out and raise the money of a jail cell, he can certainly follow the guidance that we just heard from Brad about learning how to develop a business plan, which is sell a vision, help people see it with an executive summary, drill down on the numbers, show the problem, show the solution to the problem, and then build the confidence that this person is able to execute. And I appreciate you giving us that insight. That certainly would have been a takeaway for me when I was in prison. How you said that you left the healthcare space after several years and went into construction. Tell us about how you went into construction and what success looked like for you in that industry.
So it was ironic. I very much wanted to go into operations in another industry. However, I'd been in healthcare for so long that I had to actually enter construction in a sales role that was heavily commission based, just to do something different. And when I took over, one of the things I noticed very early on, working for a small local residential and commercial roofing company, was that was doing about $2 million a year, good small business owned by two individuals, I noticed very quickly that there was a huge void in the market. And so that void that I saw was people willing to travel to outside of the state to do roofing jobs. And frankly, there was a lot of illegal immigrants working in labor, and there was a need due to natural disasters on our military bases to have people that could get legal construction workers to be able to get on base. And so I really dedicated myself to building a team of legal workers that could travel and really eliminate 98%, I would say, of our competition in pursuing these jobs.
You said you started with a company that was doing about $2 million in annual revenues. Tell us how your leadership changed that annual revenue base.
So we've established what we call our Goose division, which is government, out of state, and emergency, and it focuses primarily on military. And we are in our third year since launching that business unit. Since I launched that business unit, and we're on track to do just under $20 million in revenue for that business unit this year.
So it's a second business that you've taken more than 10x return or 10x increase in revenues, and that's quite impressive. Brad, I really want to thank you. We're end of this episode, and I really want to thank you. I'd like to recap what I would have learned from you and how that relates to our business. But before I do that, I want to ask if you have any final words that you'd like to share with our audience.
I just would like to encourage your audience to know that it's never too late to really ingrain yourself in these fundamentals that I talked about. Do not be discouraged about your current circumstances. I think there is a growing more tolerance and openness to working with people who have criminal backgrounds. I see it firsthand in my job every day in construction. So I think, if you put in the work, as Michael said, it's not too late. Really focus on who you're associating with on a daily basis. It's never too late to change your playgrounds and playmates, and really find a mentor or someone that you can look up to that can help lead you into the future as you look for further opportunities.
That's a great summary, and you also gave us that words of wisdom that I've heard from you before: playgrounds and playmates. We didn't cover it in this interview, but it effectively says, immerse yourself in situations where people have opportunity to grow, and to surround yourself with people that have that same mindset. But if you've gone through our courses at Prison Professors, you know that we focus on some really deliberate, disciplined strategies to overcome adversity and prepare for success. And that's what I heard today from Brad, just as we've heard from every person that's come on this show and told us their pathway to success. First, they define success, We heard Brad knew that he wanted to be an accountant from a very young age. And he wanted to be an accountant because he was inspired by his father, a lawyer. He wanted to learn more about business. He wanted to be able to understand how numbers worked, and that would apply to any business. And he said if he became a CPA, it would give him a great fallback. And we heard how it helped him along the road. Second, the second component of our program is you've got to have really clear goals. And we heard this story of goals throughout Brad's impressive story of going through junior high, high school, focusing on grades, getting into the University of Texas, which he described as one of the top business schools in the nation. Talked about working for global accounting firms with 10,000 employees, and then going into the private sector and sectors that he didn't have any experience with, except he understood business, and then transitioning to a different business. These are all very clear goals, and that's what positions him for success. Then you got to talk about his commitment, having the right attitude, and the right attitude is 100% commitment. And that's exactly what we heard from this leader today. Then he had to have an aspiration. He could visualize himself solving problems. He spoke about the healthcare space. He saw problems and he wanted to solve those problems. He saw the same thing in the construction industry, wanted to solve those problems, and he visualized himself building a company that could generate a 10x return. 5, he had to take action. He wasn't somebody who just talked about wanting to be successful. He did it every single day in everything that he did. 6, he had to hold himself accountable. I mean, he's an accountant. He wants to look at numbers and understand every expenditure, every investment that he makes. Does it make sense? 7, he had to stay aware of opportunities. That's how he found the opportunity in healthcare. That's how he found the opportunity in contracting, and then going into government contracting. He was aware, his head was in the game. If you're in prison, keep your head in the game. Think about what you can do with the resources around you and not what you can't do. But simultaneously, the world will become aware of you if you're building and showing this level of commitment, just as happened with Brad. I remember getting that message when he told me, when I asked him, you may remember me asking him, how did you get that internship? Well, the world became aware of Brad because he made such a commitment to getting good grades. And so when he approached his senior year in college, they came asking him, would you like to intern for us? And led him having a job when he got out. Number 8, you got to be authentic. He knew he wanted to be successful in business, so he invested the time and the energy. And that's what you have to do. Number 9, you have got to celebrate achievements. And we heard about how Brad celebrated achievements along the way, from getting started in an entry-level position with accounting, moving on to forensic accounting, moving on to get his CPA, moving on to become an entrepreneur. Those were incremental stages that he learned along the way, and he positioned himself for that. It didn't happen by accident. It happened because of a disciplined, deliberate approach. And then finally, number 10, you can see this right here. It's a Sunday afternoon in June. I'm sure it's a beautiful day in Texas, but instead of out enjoying time with his family, when I reached out to Brad and asked him if he would help us teach and inspire people in prison, he gave us that time. And that's how he shows his gratitude for the blessings that have come his way. I want to personally show my gratitude to Brad for spending time with us and allowing us to be the change that we want to see in the world. So we want to thank you very much, Brad, for spending this weekend with us. And if you're inside of a jail or a prison, we hope that you will do us the honor of learning from Brad's lesson. Not only did he take the time to make this video, but he's working very closely with me in writing the lesson plan that accompanies this video. We couldn't have done it without him. And I want to thank you for being a part of the Prison Professors community. You are now a prison professor.
Thanks, Michael. And tell your audience, don't be afraid to swing the bat and take action.
Right on. All right. Thanks again. We'll be back with more lessons, but make sure that you're paying attention to these lessons. And if you're watching this outside, make sure that you subscribe to us on YouTube. We are striving to be the change that we want to see in the world by helping more people in jail and prison prepare for success. Thanks.